Lewis and Max have another disagreement as McLaren's pace is becoming untouchable. Oscar's manager could be the surprise key to Lando Norris's championship chances, and Red Bull in danger of crumbling even further. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Nico Rosberg, the F1 2016 world champion, says Kevin Magnussen must learn to change his approach after a ban-incurring Pierre Gasly incident had him declaring that governing body the FIA don't want racing. Magnussen received a 10-second time penalty and, crucially, 2 super license points after banging wheels with Alpine's Pierre Gasly going into the second chicane at Monza, both drivers taking to the runoff but escaping any damage. Those 2 penalty points took Magnussen to 12 for the 12-month period, making him the first driver to receive a one-race ban under the system. That means Magnussen misses the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, with Oliver Behrman, already signed to Haas for F1 2025, called up in his place, with Magnussen's approach the problem in Rosberg's eyes. Magnussen just has to learn at some point that he needs to take it a bit more easy, said the Sky F1 pundit, because it just happens too often. Rosberg's comments came after Magnussen had further criticized the FIA, pointing to an incident involving his Haas teammate Nico Hülkenberg, who was pushed wide at Ascari by Daniel Ricciardo, for which Ricciardo got a 5-second penalty. Me and Gasly had slight contact, no damage on either car, no consequence in the race. We just had slight contact and missed the corner, Magnussen told Sky F1. And so what? We were racing. I don't know why we need to be throwing around penalties like this. And on top of that, I saw Nico almost get thrown into the wall at 300 kilometers an hour by Ricciardo. I'm not saying he did it on purpose, but still he got 5 seconds. I got 10 seconds. It doesn't add up at all. Asked if he wished to speak to the stewards about his opinion, he said he has done so too many times before and claimed that they just don't want racing. Usually it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything, said Magnussen in regards to conversations with the stewards. Even though I go to speak to them, I've spoken to them many times, too many times, and I still don't understand what the rules are. Seems like they're just throwing around penalties. They don't want racing. That's what it seems to me. If this thing between me and Gasly can't be deemed a racing incident, then I don't know what can. It doesn't make sense. Haas sit P7 in the F1 2024 Constructors' Championship on 28 points with 8 rounds to go, 6 of those points scored by Magnussen. Oscar Piastri's bold overtake on McLaren teammate Lando Norris on the opening lap of the Italian Grand Prix was influenced by his manager, Mark Webber. That is the opinion of David Coulthard, who believes Webber got in Piastri's ear ahead of the race at Monza to make it difficult for the McLaren pit wall. Piastri completed arguably the outstanding overtake of the F1 2024 season on the first lap at Monza, where he completed an ambitious move around the outside of teammate Norris at the second chicane to take the lead. The Australian's pass came, even though McLaren had been expected to enforce team orders to help Norris's title bid, with World Championship leader Max Verstappen finishing a distant 6th. Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc eventually took a surprise victory at Monza after utilizing a one-stop strategy, with Piastri and Norris forced to settle for 2nd and 3rd, respectively. Andrea Stella, the McLaren team boss, later hinted that the team could reconsider their stance on team orders ahead of the final 8 races, telling media, including PlanetF1.com, that the team want to give it a go to try and win the Drivers' Championship with Norris. Norris trails Verstappen by 62 points ahead of next weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix, with McLaren now 8 points behind Red Bull in the Constructors' title race. Appearing on Channel 4's coverage of the Italian Grand Prix, Coulthard shared his theory that his former Red Bull teammate Webber had influenced Piastri's attack on Norris to put McLaren in a difficult position when it came to enforcing team orders. Reflecting on Piastri's overtake, he said, "I think there's a bit of Aussie grit getting in there. Mark Webber's got in his ear and said, 'Buddy, you've got to try and turn this around to make it difficult for the team.' Brave pass around the outside." Coulthard went on to suggest that McLaren should have forced Piastri and Norris to swap positions when it became apparent that Leclerc could not be caught to boost Norris's points total in his bid to close the gap to Verstappen. The Scot cited his own experience of supporting Mika Hakkinen in McLaren's fight against Michael Schumacher and Ferrari as evidence that every point counts in a tense title battle. Asked if McLaren should have reversed their drivers' positions in the closing laps, Coulthard said, I would, based on what I've learned through my racing career. I was in a situation where Mika was a bit quicker in qualifying, was delivering the better chance of a championship. We were up against Ferrari and Michael Schumacher. I didn't like it, but I think that, taking a look at the bigger picture, McLaren can win this constructors' title. They're only 8 points away. They still also could win the Drivers' Championship. It was another not very good day point scoring-wise for Max Verstappen. And although Lando was brilliant again, getting the fastest lap bonus point on the last lap, that could be crucial later in the year. Gianpiero Lambiase recently recommitted his future to Red Bull, with Max Verstappen's long-serving race engineer the latest to showcase his loyalty to the team. Lambiase has worked directly with Verstappen for the entirety of the Dutchman's tenure at Red Bull, having joined the Milton Keynes-based squad in 2015 after a decade with Jordan Midland Force India. It's been a year of revitalization and renewal at Red Bull over the past 12 months, with senior figures such as Rob Marshall and Adrian Newey leaving. Marshall took on a technical director role with McLaren in 2024, while Newey is serving a period of soft gardening leave from the F1 team before setting off for pastures new by the middle of F1 2025. More recently, Red Bull also confirmed the departure of longtime sporting director Jonathan Wheatley as he takes on a new career challenge by taking on the role of team boss at the burgeoning Audi F1 project. Wheatley will see out the F1 2024 season with Red Bull before taking a few months out on gardening leave. But aside from these departures, Red Bull has secured its future with most of its long-term engineering staff re-signing for the squad for the foreseeable. These include chief engineers Paul Monahan and Ben Waterhouse, as well as the leading architects behind the dominant RB18 and RB19 machines, Enrico Balbo, head of aerodynamics, and Pierre Wache, technical director. The latest figure to recommit their future to Red Bull is Gianpiero Lambiase, as PlanetF1.com understands Verstappen's race engineer, who also serves as the team's head of race engineering, put pen to paper on a new deal prior to the summer break. Lambiase was wooed by offers from other teams, including recent attempts from Ferrari and McLaren to secure his services. But Lambiase's skills are understood to be of utmost importance to Red Bull, while the British-Italian engineer's loyalty to Red Bull and team boss Christian Horner played a key role in his re-signing. With Wheatley departing the team after F1 2024, the renewal of Lambiase's contract also opens the door for a possible promotion, as Red Bull eyes up a new team structure which is yet to be confirmed. Helmut Marko recently revealed Wheatley's role is likely to be split among multiple people. Lambiase turning away from the temptation of moving to either Ferrari or McLaren comes shortly after Balbo and Wache did likewise with Aston Martin. Team owner Lawrence Stroll is understood to have been personally involved in attempting to woo the Red Bull kingpins by way of the offer of shares in the team, while Tom Hart, Verstappen's performance engineer, resisted an offer to join Mercedes. Horner has previously spoken about the strength and depth within Red Bull's technical ranks, with a succession plan for life after Newey having been worked on in recent years, while the team boss more recently joked about Wheatley's salary, allowing him to snaffle up some external hires. Wache, who assumes the responsibilities for leading Red Bull's technical department as Newey steps down as chief technical officer, recently spoke to PlanetF1.com in an exclusive interview to explain how Red Bull has been prepared for some personnel turnover for some time. As an engineering team, what you see from outside is one aspect, but on our side, we already know. When people leave the team, we have already organized ourselves with our team, Wache said. We would prefer him with us. But that is not how it is. We don't think in this way. We try to see what you can do for yourself and how you can improve. If we see some weaknesses, we try to improve, and this is how we work. We concentrate on what we can do better. Asked if a new chapter is starting at Red Bull, Wache added, "For sure, but it's not new. Before we had Peter Prodrimo, who left after 2014. Mark Ellis left after 2013. It's the nature of the team and the leaders who left. They were a leader in their area. But it's a natural aspect of each organization. For sure, Adrian was a big figure of the system, but at one point we give a chance to the younger, bright people to embrace this challenge, like I have now. Some people like Enrico Balbo, head of Aero, Ben Waterhouse, head of performance engineering, Craig Skinner, chief designer, Paul Monahan, chief engineer. It is good for the people and for the team. Lewis Hamilton has compared leading a Grand Prix in dominant fashion to F1 testing, labeling it so boring. While Max Verstappen's ideal way to win races is to dominate a Grand Prix and crush his opponents, fellow F1 world champion Lewis Hamilton says he much prefers the challenge of slicing through the field to win a race. Hamilton explained his viewpoint on how he views leading from the front as he spoke on the Performance People podcast, opening up on a situation he got very accustomed to during Mercedes' dominant years between 2014 and 20. While Hamilton regularly stuck his car on pole to dominate a race, the 7-time F1 world champion revealed it's not the type of racing he enjoys most. "Oh God, it's so boring," he laughed. "Honestly, starting from first, leading the race all the way through, it's really boring compared to fighting from the back and having racing. The lack of wheel-to-wheel action is something that's missing in such a scenario," Hamilton said, comparing the situation to a simple day of testing. "It's not racing," Hamilton said. "You could be on a test. You are fighting a time gap behind you, but you have to psych yourself into thinking that you're fighting a car ahead or something like that. You have to be chasing something. But it's different when you have a car or cars ahead of you and there's a track that you can overtake, like ASTON or Silverstone, for example. Different lines you're trying to discover utilizing the tires, the wind, crosswinds, all these different things. And then you finally get someone in a battle, that's the best thing. That's the most rewarding experience as a driver." Asked to pick out examples of the type of racing he's enjoyed the most over the years, Hamilton smiled. "I have a few. So I think it was 1995 or 96 in karting in Buckmore Park. I was fourth all the way in this race, and I couldn't keep up with the top three. I just couldn't get closer," he said. "Then, on the last lap, they were all squabbling and I overtook them all in one corner and I won this race. That was one of those reminders just to never give up. It's never over until it's over. So that was the first step that I particularly remember. And then, in Formula 2, I spun in Turkey. I can't remember, 6th to last or something like that. On that scene, the F1 teams are watching you. Every single moment, every movement that I did, Ron Dennis, then McLaren boss, who was my boss or sponsor, was sitting on the wall watching, or in his office watching. So I made that mistake, and I was like, damn, in my mind. I was like, and that's veered me off of winning and getting to Formula 1. So I drove back from, I think it was like 20th or something like that, to 2nd. So that's one particularly that I remember. And then probably my wet race in Silverstone 2008 probably was one of my best performances ever, I would say, yeah." David Coulthard said his former team McLaren must now think they're world champions, and if they do back one driver for the driver's title, it is bad news for Oscar Piastri. While earlier in F1 2024 it appeared as though Red Bull were heading for a third title double on the trot, now the specter of McLaren looms large. The Woking squad only 8 points behind Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship with as many races remaining, while Lando Norris has reduced Max Verstappen's Drivers' Championship lead to 62 points. Coulthard, speaking on the Formula for Success podcast, acknowledged the strengthening calls for McLaren to back Norris and admitted that if McLaren are to put their eggs in one basket, the call would go Norris's way, which isn't going to sit comfortably with Oscar. "We're in this situation where there's only 44 points between Oscar and Lando, where Lando is 62 points behind Max. So, arguably, it's actually too close to call in terms of doing a team order," Coulthard began. "There was many people, many of the channels, many of the journalists after Monza saying, McLaren need to get behind one driver. Quite clearly, if they are, it has to be the guy with more points. That isn't going to sit comfortably with Oscar. But I think that McLaren now absolutely need to think they're world champions. Because if you think you're lucky to be in a position to win the Constructors, and you think you're lucky to win races, you're not thinking like the champion teams. The champion teams are pissed off when they don't win races. They're not going, well, 2nd and 3rd is a good result. They're going, what a disaster! We should have won this race." So some big debates that will have to take place in the coming weeks. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella confirmed as much, the team's papaya rules of engagement receiving an analysis after Piastri's brave overtake on Norris at the second Monza chicane during the opening lap, taking the lead from Norris, who soon dropped to P3, where he finished, a position behind Piastri as Charles Leclerc and Ferrari pulled off a one-stop masterclass. And Stella confirmed that McLaren are ready to chase the driver's title with Norris. Asked by media including PlanetF1.com at Monza whether there will be a stage where Norris is McLaren's #1 driver, Stella replied, "Well, Already in our conversation, even before the race here, we acknowledge that Lando is in the best position from a driver's championship point of view. So we have conversations with Oscar, we have conversations with Lando, and we have conversations together, and then we kind of define our rules of engagement. We need to take a look at the first lap, but it has to be done in a way that is competent, is detailed, specific, takes into account the videos, takes into account what was the driver's expectation, and then see what can we learn from this situation to adjust the future situations. I state the fact that we do want to give it a go at the championship with Lando. However, as part of this mission, Coulthard's co-star, ex-F1 team boss Eddie Jordan, believes McLaren will continue to let Norris and Piastri be free to race under the papaya rules. I can guarantee that anything that happens in that team, fairness and sportsmanship will override everything, he said. So that's why I think it'll be an open book. I think that McLaren owe it to their two drivers to have brought them to where they are at the moment. I think that is not in danger. Do I feel that they will pick and say, okay, Lando, this is your world championship. Have a go with this and see. Will you help then maybe Oscar the following year? No. I think that's too elongated. It's absolutely too much pie in the sky. Because things change so dramatically in Formula One, as we know and as we've seen with McLaren. I think there will be an open book. And personally, going into the next race, it's the same. Everyone is able to race. And next up is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, a race won by Red Bull for the past 3 years. Aston Martin is set to announce new investors to set a new valuation benchmark, according to a report from Sky. Aston Martin is set to sell a large stake to two prominent investment funds, as per Sky News. According to a report from Sky News, Aston Martin will set a new valuation benchmark thanks to fresh investment from HPS Investment Partners and Accel. HPS is a US-based firm boasting $115 billion in assets, while Accel is a giant of the Silicon Valley venture capital sector. The investments are reported to value the Aston Martin F1 team at somewhere between $1.5 billion and $2 billion, with the deal expected to be finalized shortly. The report comes just days before Aston Martin is expected to announce a titanic technical signing in former Red Bull Chief Technical Officer Adrian Newey, who is currently on gardening leave from the F1 team, after tempting the 65-year-old to sign what is believed to be a 3-year deal. According to Sky, HPS is understood to have agreed to refinance debts incurred by the Aston Martin F1 team during the rebuild of its F1 technology campus near Silverstone over the past 2 years. The sale would see HPS and Accel acquire between 20% and 25% of AMR GP Holdings, the Aston Martin F1 team's parent company. This sale would follow a minority stake sale last year to Arctos Partners, a private equity investor, with the Financial Times suggesting at the time a team valuation of $1 billion. Lawrence Stroll is set to remain as the majority shareholder of the company, despite the sales of shares to Arctos, HPS, and Accel. Sky's sources claim that Aston Martin has been advised on the sale by the Rain Group, a merchant bank that was involved in the sale of Chelsea Football Club and selling a stake in Manchester United to Ineos chairman and Mercedes F1 shareholder Sir Jim Ratcliffe. According to a separate report earlier this week, the Times reported that Newey is set to be given shares in Aston Martin as part of his remuneration package, with Italian sources claiming the engineer will be paid $100 million over his 3-year deal. A spokesperson for the Aston Martin F1 team declined to comment on the speculation when approached by PlanetF1.com. That's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next one.